Usually when you first meet a narcissist, they seem magnetic. They hold attention, dominate rooms, and appear unstoppable. But something begins to shift with age. The mask starts to crack, the charisma fades, the world stops revolving around them, and their reality begins to crumble. This isn't a coincidence. It's the unraveling of the false self, the carefully crafted persona they built to survive, control, and be adored. And as time catches up, it becomes the very structure that takes them down. And in today's video, we are going to take a deep dive into why they built the false self in the first place and how and why it deteriorates with age. So if you have an aging narcissist in your life, today's video is for you. But first, if you're new to this channel, I'd like to take a moment and welcome you and invite you to please subscribe and be sure and hit that notification bell because I put out new videos every week. Also, if you are interested in private one-on-one narcissistic abuse recovery coaching with me, please visit my website or send me an email. Both are linked in the description below. So today we are talking about the aging narcissist and the ultimate death of their false self and why narcissists deteriorate with age. And just so you can fully understand this, let's start at the beginning of the narcissist's life. In youth, the narcissist experiences a catastrophic failure of attachment. What should have been the foundation of a stable identity becomes a psychological war zone. They became trapped in a paranoid schizoid position, which means they see the world in extremes, all good or all bad, powerful or worthless, loved or abandoned. There is no middle ground, no integration, and no stable sense of self. So, in order to survive, they construct a false self, an idealized version of who they wish they were, designed to win admiration and avoid shame. But this false self isn't a personality, it's a performance. It doesn't breathe, it doesn't evolve, and it certainly doesn't age well. It was never built to last, only to protect. And as time passes, the mask grows heavier, the cracks grow deeper, and the emptiness behind it becomes harder to hide. The tragedy of the narcissist is that they don't mature, they harden. And what once looked like confidence begins to look like cruelty. What once passed for charm starts to rot into rage, and the false self that once helped them survive slowly begins to collapse under the weight of time. It's very important to understand that the false self is a mask, not an actual core or true identity, and that distinction is everything. A core identity is built from authentic experience, emotional connection, and the integration of both strengths and flaws. But the narcissist never developed that kind of self. Instead, they manufactured an image, a carefully constructed facade of perfection, power, and control. This false self wasn't designed for growth. It was designed for defense. It served one purpose: to shield the narcissist from unbearable shame and vulnerability that were never allowed to process. But here's the problem. Because it isn't real, it can't evolve, it can't mature, it can't deepen, and it certainly can't withstand the wear and tear of time. So while healthy people evolve, the narcissist erodes, and as the mask ages, it loses its shine. What once looked impressive now feels hollow. The persona they curated begins to collapse under the pressure of reality, and with nothing solid underneath to take its place, the narcissist starts to fall apart from the inside out. Now let's dig into some contributing factors that make a narcissist deteriorate with age. First, narcissistic supply becomes scarce, and for the aging narcissist, that scarcity feels like death. In their youth, supply flows freely. Admiration, attention, sexual validation, social envy, all of those things. Their charm is fresh, their appearance is still a currency, and their ambition gives them a place in the spotlight. But aging is a cruel mirror, and it reflects back what the narcissist cannot tolerate, which is decline. As their looks fade, their relevance slips, and their influence starts to evaporate. They find themselves working harder for scraps of the adoration that once came effortlessly. And the tragedy is, they were never fueled by connection, only consumption. The false self depends on constant reinforcement from the outside world to feel alive. But when supply runs dry, so does their illusion of worth. There is no inner core to fall back on, no reservoir of real self-esteem, just an empty performance with no audience left to applaud it. And in that silence, the mask begins to crumble. As the years unfold, patterns emerge that can no longer be dismissed as coincidence. The broken friendships, the toxic romances, the trail of people who once adored them and now keep their distance. It all starts to add up. And with each passing year, the illusion gets harder to maintain. What once seemed like confidence now looks like entitlement. What once looked like strength is exposed as emotional immaturity. Aging becomes the great unmasker. It strips away the distractions like beauty, status, and performance, and leaves only what's real. And for the narcissist, that reality is often cruelly revealing. Shallow relationships, a crumbling reputation, and a deep void where a core identity should be. They can't outrun the truth forever because time, unlike people, never falls for the act. Control becomes harder to maintain also. And for the narcissist, that loss is intolerable. Control is their oxygen. It's how they regulate their reality, manage their image, and manipulate the people around them. But aging disrupts that carefully crafted ecosystem. They begin to lose the very things that once made their dominance effortless, like their youth, health, financial independence, and social clout. They may find themselves relying on others for care, for money, for relevance, and nothing terrifies a narcissist more than dependence. Their ability to command attention fades. Their voice no longer carries the same authority, and the rooms they once dominated grow quiet in their presence. Without control, the narcissist feels exposed, small, and powerless. And that's when the mask begins to fracture in violent ways through narcissistic rage, paranoia, or a full psychological collapse. Because in their mind, loss of control isn't just some minor inconvenience. It feels like life or death to them. It is absolutely terrifying. Another telltale sign of the aging narcissist's false self deteriorating is that rage starts to replace charm. And this shift is unmistakable. In their prime, narcissists rely heavily on their charm as a means to distract, seduce, and control other people. However, charm is a performance that requires energy, finesse, and an audience willing to play along. As they age, the performance falters. What once came off as charismatic begins to sound arrogant, impatient, or downright entitled. And when charm fails to yield the same results, when people stop reacting with awe or submission, the narcissist doesn't use that as an opportunity to self-reflect. They erupt. Rage becomes their default language. The bitterness simmers beneath the surface, bubbling over in unpredictable mood swings, cutting remarks, or outright explosions. The few people who remain in their orbit often walk on eggshells or walk away entirely. Without charm to disarm and manipulate, the narcissist's true emotional validity is exposed, and it's not magnetic. It's more in alignment with repulsion. Another aspect worthy of being mentioned here is that isolation eventually sets in. And it's one of the cruelest ironies of the narcissist's aging process, not because it is undeserved, but because it is self-inflicted. Over the years, they pushed away their children with emotional manipulation, burned bridges with friends through betrayal, and discarded partners the moment the adoration faded. Anyone who dared to set a boundary or stopped feeding their ego was cut off or vilified. And now, in the quiet years of life, the consequences arrive. The phone doesn't ring. Holidays are spent alone. There's no one left to mirror their importance back to them. But rather than reflect or repent, the narcissist doubles down on the delusion. They blame everyone but themselves. They rewrite the story to remain the victim or the misunderstood genius. Because even in isolation, the false self refuses to die without a fight. And so they sit in the prison they built, surrounded by silence, still clinging to a fantasy no one else believes. Next, the inner emptiness grows louder, and for the aging narcissist, silence becomes the cruelest sound. For decades, they kept the void at bay with a constant flood of narcissistic supply, attention, chaos, conquest, performance. But time strips those distractions away. The applause fades, the phone stops buzzing, the mirror stops flattering, and in that stillness, they come face to face with what they've spent a lifetime outrunning, their own emptiness. The shame they buried, the self-hatred they masked, the emotional numbness they denied, it never disappeared. It just waited. And now, with fewer people to manipulate and fewer illusions to maintain, the truth becomes unbearable. There's no real joy, no authentic connection, no inner peace, just a hollow ache where a self should have been. And as the silence stretches, that emptiness becomes deafening, screaming the one thing they've never been able to accept, that none of it was real. Next, they will begin to self-destruct, and the fall is rarely quiet. When the false self starts to collapse, the narcissist doesn't heal, they unravel. Their entire identity was built on illusion, control, and external validation. So when that foundation crumbles, they spiral. Some drown the silence in alcohol or drugs, numbing the shame they can no longer outrun. Others erupt outward, launching smear campaigns, instigating lawsuits, or dragging a strange family into one last desperate power play. Rage becomes their anchor. Chaos becomes their comfort, and all the while their health deteriorates. Years of emotional suppression, stress, and self-neglect catches up. The body begins to mirror the mind, worn, inflamed, and collapsing under the pressure of a life spent pretending. But instead of seeking help, they often double down, trying to resurrect the fantasy, even as it destroys them. Because in their world, collapse is still better than exposure. Death terrifies them more than anything, not just because it's the end, but because it's the one thing they cannot manipulate, charm, or control. For the narcissist whose entire existence has been a performance, death is the ultimate humiliation. The false self was built to be admired, not to decay. It doesn't know how to age gracefully, let alone die with dignity. And so, as the years press on, death isn't just a distant fear. It becomes a daily shadow. Each wrinkle, each ache, each reminder of mortality feels like an assault on the grand illusion. They don't fear death the way others do. They fear fading, being forgotten, becoming irrelevant. And in many ways, they begin to grieve their own legacy long before their final breath. Because deep down, they know the world will move on and their fantasy will not survive them. The narcissist deterioration isn't just about aging. It's about the inevitable collapse of an identity that was never real to begin with. The false self cannot survive forever. And when it dies, the narcissist is left face to face with the one person they've spent a lifetime avoiding, themselves. For survivors, Watching this decline can bring a mix of emotions, grief, anger, even relief. But make no mistake, what you're witnessing isn't karma. It's the natural consequence of living a life built on an illusion. And the death of the false self is the one thing a narcissist can't manipulate their way out of. Okay, that's going to do it for today's video. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and please subscribe to my channel. Also, follow me on my other social media platforms. The links are in the description below. Thanks for watching, everyone.